Hi everyone, and welcome to your Data for Culture module. A bit about me and our firm first. As an introduction, I am Ankit Kalkar. I am a co-founder and head of innovation at this firm called Synthesis. Synthesis are a creative data consultancy, and what we do is we help future-proof businesses by making sense of the world's data. What I mean by the world's data is everything that's publicly available out there online. So every social post that's ever been made from a public profile, every patent that's ever been filed, every search that's ever been made, every round of funding, and the amount of funding that a startup ever got around the world. All of this information is publicly available out there. You can query it through APIs or where terms of service allow. You can scrape it from the internet and you can stitch together huge data sets that can help you answer a wide range of questions. We call this kind of data open data because it's openly available and it's not beyond some privacy wall on the internet. So that includes everything, a Google Maps listing, an e-commerce listing, e-commerce review, a recipe that's ever been posted in any market around the world. So all of this data is openly available and helps you answer a range of questions. We do that across 5 areas of specialization. Futures is our foresight practice, where we use this kind of data at a macro scale, like the growing share of aging sort of population within your economy, how that's going to change food habits, consumption habits. So we interlink macro forces interacting with each other to tell you how your category is going to change 10 years down the line, what you need to do today to prepare. Innovation is our offering, which helps our partners understand what new products should they be bringing into market, what functional emotional attributes should they have, what need are they really solving. We do brand strategy in terms of what is the role of your brand in culture, how can you create lasting and enduring impact uh, in culture. Or audiences practice is about understanding who's your audience today, who's your growth audience tomorrow, and how do you get it from A to B. And distribution is about using geolocation data to help our partners understand where they should be present physically in the real world. Those are our offerings, and we do that with a wide range of our partners. They're mostly across F&B, entertainment, tech, gaming, and sports. And we've been very fortunate in our journey of synthesis in the last 9 years to be working with some of the best and some of the most interesting businesses out there around the world. So that's a bit about us. And with that, let's just quickly jump into your module. So in this pre-read, we are just going to give you a primer about how to read data in a context for culture. And that's an introduction to what we call human-centered data science. So let's jump right into it. Now, the first thing that you should be thinking of when you're using data for culture is how can I or how can I not use data for culture? Because data, can it understand and decode a complex entity like culture, or is it too reductive? Is it too binary? Are we losing some richness when we're looking at data from a culture from a data lens? This is a debate that you should constantly be having with yourself to understand where you should apply data for culture, where you shouldn't. But to equip you with an understanding of what data can really do is the primary objective of this module. And we'll then equip you with what questions could you solve, how could you approach a question uh, when you're using data for culture. Who is it applicable for? Is it just for people who are going to be in the world of brands, or is it going to be a wider range of people, and so on? So that's what we wanted to share with you. Because, and this debate exists because, like, this era of data and machine learning and AI analytics, it carried a great promise. It's not been that long, but people have been very optimistic about the role that AI can play in your businesses to help you understand people, understand culture, move forward, make big bets in terms of innovation and brand strategy. Yet, by and large, it's only resulting in reductive logic is the experience with all the people that we are uh, talking to, our partners at the industry side, as well as professionals in the agency business, so in the service industry. So everyone feels some unease with, okay, maybe we are not using it in the right way. Maybe we are stretching it into a zone where it's probably not applicable. So it's resulting in that reductive logic. To illustrate that point, we love using this example of a time when our firm was out for an offsite. in this city. This was in Perth, and we wanted to go from point A to point B. So from that Kings Park to a restaurant there, and to go there, Google Maps suggests this route. For example, so the route that Google Maps suggests is like the quickest, shortest, most efficient, the blue line there, and that's what it looks like. It's not the kind of scenery you want to see when you're out on holiday, for example. Right? On the contrary, there's another route available on this path, which is going through a coastal road here. It's about 6 minutes and 3 kilometers longer, which if you're on holiday, you would really not care. It's got a nice view of the downtown with a seafront, a cricket stadium. So it's really quite a beautiful route to take. And if I was on holiday, I would take the orange one, but the app would never show me that, which means that, and that's what it looks like, by the way. So there's really no comparison in terms of what route you would want to take if you were on holiday and you were to choose. But Google Maps or any algorithm would show you the shortest route, the most efficient one, and it will not show you the scenic route. So algorithms don't show you the scenic route because they don't see the scenic route. It's not that they can't. Like if I just plugged in an image like this into even a basic LLM, it would be able to tell you which one's a more scenic drive. In fact, I tried already, and I did put an image, just this image with no context of, yeah, this is a scenic, a beautiful coastal road, or this is a stadium here. I just put in this image, blue line or orange line, for example, in an LLM. It could answer, obviously, oh, this is more scenic, and if you're on holiday, then you should be choosing the orange one. So it's not that algorithms can't see the scenic route. They don't see the scenic route because they're not designed for that purpose. What we are noticing is that the way we are looking at data, the way we are looking at AI to help solve very fuzzy cultural subjective problems like understanding culture, uh, in all those approaches, algorithms are not designed to see the scenic route. Think of it in all of the other places where algorithms are preventing us from seeing the scenic route. So think of your social media news feeds. It's just responding to where you spend more time and it's giving you more of that. The algorithm gives you just similar content to what people like you are consuming. So it's all quite deterministic. It's not actually speaking to your interests. It is speaking to what you already consumed. It is not speaking to you what you might like to consume and where you might like to grow as a person. From there to, let's say, what dating apps are serving you in terms of who you could likely meet, for example. Look at your food delivery homepage. Maybe you don't like ordering the same kind of food, but by force of habit, you're just going on ordering the same thing from the same restaurant and it shows up on your homepage. It's convenient and so on. That's shaping your behaviors in a way. So when you're looking at reels, the rabbit holes that you go into, those are also designed by uh, algorithms that don't help you see the scenic route. So they are designed for efficiency. In each of these cases, the efficiency metric is very different. When in Reels, the efficiency metric is the time you're spending there and the number of ads they can show you primarily. On Zomato homepage, they just want you to quickly, as soon as you log in, get to an order, place an order, and get out of the app experience really quickly so that the order is closed. So they are designed for a particular metric. They perform to the metric. They don't perform to the human aspect of that experience, right? Which is why we hear this phrase a lot from our partners, and it's not just now in the world of new world of AI that we are hearing this. We've been hearing this since the last decade or more than a decade, where they say we feel data rich but insight poor. So we have all this data, we have all these ways to analyze data, cut it quantitatively, but when it comes to culture, they feel really insight poor in terms of like what's really happening and what do we even do with it. That is the experience that we are hearing from our partners. To get into a bit of understanding of why that's happening, research is of two kinds, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is a bit fuzzy, it's based on conversations, personal interviews, it's focus groups. Quantitative is very rigid and specific in terms of its responses to a set questionnaire, cluster analysis, audience sizing, so on, opportunity sizing, that kind of an offering. Qualitative research, the point of doing that is to get depth of understanding. Quant is to get scale of understanding. So if you're to launch a new product and you want to understand what needs could it really solve, you talk to people, you get depth of understanding, but you could only talk to 20 people, 30 people. That would be a huge qualitative study. Uh, to really know if that's a big market out there, you'll have to a quantitative study because then you understand scale. And when you're doing depth, you know that you're sacrificing scale. When you're doing scale, you know that you're sacrificing depth. The essence of the promise of using data for cultural inquiry, why we should even care about exploring a way to do that, even if it's harder, even if it's not what we do traditionally, is that this could help us marry depth and scale. So you're not sacrificing one for the other. And that is the promise of data for cultural inquiry. When you're able to do that, you unlock a huge opportunity for yourself. But again, that question comes back, like human experiences are so complex, uh, and therefore culture is so complex. It's subjective, it's layered, it's got so many dimensions to it. Data, on the other hand, is very abstract, it's reductive, and it's very binary. You can't read culture for sure by just looking at how many likes a particular post in a given conversation got. That would be a very reductive way of understanding what is happening culturally. To be able to understand that, you need to understand two kinds of data. So the fuzzy, complex, layered, subjective things usually will present themselves as what we call unstructured data. And what you may be already familiar with, when you think of data, what you're actually thinking of 9 out of 10 times, or maybe 10 out of 10, is what we call structured data. Structured data is collected deliberately, it's objective, it's specific, in terms of its purpose. So it's collected for a particular thing. So sales data is collected to report sales. It's supposed to be analyzed to understand how your sales did. So the use case is defined before it was collected. It was collected for that, and it needs to be used for that. Uh, on the other hand, there's also like campaign reach, there's GDP, income levels, purchase history. All of this kind of data is what we call structured data. Unstructured data, on the other hand, is not collected, it is generated, and not in an AI sense, but generated in a sense of, let's say, all Amazon reviews against a product. No one's collecting that data. No one's asking you what you felt about the product. You had uh, an experience using it. You wanted to share it. You put it out there. Now, if we want to understand and use those Amazon reviews to maybe understand what features are most exciting about a product, and what drives tension points, for example, that is something that we are doing. So the use of it is adaptable. You can use unstructured data for any purpose because it's not collected for a certain purpose, it's generated on its own. So all of the millions of searches around a particular topic over time, if you see the Google Trends chart, the trend line, it's not collected, it's generated. Therefore, it's subjective. What does it really mean? We have to make sense of it. We have to frame it in a certain way. So it is subjective. So we frame the meaning. It's adaptable. That means we frame the usage. That is the difference between structured and unstructured data. And the real power of data comes to life when we are not just in a siloed way using structured data only or unstructured only. It becomes really powerful when you're able to combine structured and unstructured data. Then you have all the ingredients necessary to understand culture. At the heart of this is the philosophy that all of the data that we are talking about here, structured or unstructured, is not just numbers, it's actually about people. Data is not numbers. So even if you're talking about GDP, a GDP growth of X percent has an effect, an impact on what culture looks like. So for example, right now, if there's a cultural sort of shared feeling of maybe gloom and doom, it's like a hesitancy to think about our future because we don't know, we don't feel certain about where things are going. That is an economic reality which is captured in abstract numbers, which reflects a cultural reality. Uh, 20 years ago, or maybe 10, 15 years ago, back in the time when we were starting out our careers, or just before that, the growth rates were much higher. So people felt way more optimistic about the future. So even a number as dry as GDP, as dry as employment rates, has an impact and is describing something about the people behind it. So every number has some personal, human, and when you collect it together, a cultural reality behind it. We need to really understand what that number is measuring, frame it, and adapt it in a way that is culturally sound. That's how we can unlock an opportunity to use data for culture. And finally, answer that question: can data be used for culture? Yes, it can, but we have to really make sense of what are we looking at, what is that number measuring, what is the human or cultural truth and reality behind that number. We call this practice of looking at data in this way human-centered data science. It's a way of understanding data better by understanding the people and the context shaping it. Yeah. So How do we use it then? So when you are doing something of a study or a project for the product you're working on or the brand you're working on, or if you are doing a consultancy piece to help someone understand the cultural context better through data, through human-centered data science, you'd go through this kind of a process that we've laid out here. And that process is very specific to the nature of this unstructured plus structured data that you'll encounter when you're doing something around this topic. So it goes as you first frame the question, then you layer your sources, then you iteratively interrogate, and then you narrate a data story. We'll deep dive a bit into one and two in this tree read, and the rest we'll touch upon when we meet in person. So, for framing the question, it's important because remember, like we said, when it's unstructured data, it was not collected for a specific purpose. I need to understand, I need to frame how do I frame that, how do I read it, and for that, first you have to frame the question as in whatever your partner has asked you. So there's a few projects that Bikram just shared with me that you're working on. So given whatever your project is, you need to first translate that question that a business has into what am I trying to answer, the research question. This is a practice that you may be familiar with if you've taken any research subjects in your electives. But if you've not, framing that question is the first step in actually uncovering, understanding anything. Whether you're doing research, whether you're doing a consultancy piece, whether you are working with in the CEO's office and you want to really turn the company around, make something profitable, but understand culturally what's happening, what's the opportunity. In either case, you have to first frame that question into, okay, what am I trying to understand? So the question will be about a business. The framing should be about what you will do to uncover, to answer that question. The second thing that you do is you layer data sources because open data is, again, it's very scattered. So conversations around like this image goes, conversations around sneakers kind of have died down in the last 5 years. But if you wanted to revive sneaker culture, let's say if that was a question, you would have to stitch together a lot of data sources. You would have to stitch together maybe Google searches, maybe what's happening on social, what's happened to all the YouTube reviewers and influencers who used to drive hype culture, and where did they go away, who's taken their place, etc., etc. So you need to stitch together many data sources. One data source is not enough. The richer your data set, the more comprehensive your answer. Doesn't mean that different sources, as in like bring together five platforms every time. It could be within one specific platform, but you need to get all kinds of conversation within that platform. So layer your data sources. Third one is that you iteratively interrogate. Iterative because when you're doing a quant study or a qual study, you go in, you push your survey questionnaire, you get your answers in quant, you go meet people, you get all the rich insight in qual, and you come back, and that's the data you have to work with. Now, if you have a new question, okay, I see something here, this may connect to some other thing, you cannot go back and ask people that question again because the data has been collected. The point of, and one of the big points of difference when you're using data for culture is that you can go back and interrogate the data in a different way. Also because it's unstructured data a lot of the times. So it could be used for a different use case. So I see a link here, A may be related to B, maybe it's caused by C. I can go back to my data and iteratively interrogate how that happened. And at the end of it, if we are really human centered about how we are using data for culture, we start with a human framing of that question, like what am I really trying to answer? What is the human truth behind that data? And you end with narrating a data story. You shouldn't drown your internal, external stakeholders, partners, clients in dashboards and charts. You should tell them a data story in the richest way possible. And that's how you complete the loop in terms of how you approach human-centered data science. Frame, layer, iterate, narrate. That's the flow. Let's get into the first one and give you a bit of a sense of how you go about it. So let's say when you're talking about framing your question, uh, these are all now real examples that I'm trying to share with you in terms of the work that we've done. And it'll also give you a sense of the kind of work that we do and what we'll be talking about more in the days to come when we meet in person. So there was a question from this iconic toy manufacturer brand. Everyone knows about it. I can't name them here, but you could take a guess It's a huge iconic toy manufacturer, and they needed a strategy to shape the global narrative around play, learning, and creativity. So the question was, what should they communicate? What should the brand stand for? And where should they innovate? So what should the business be owning? What narrative should the business be owning? And to do that, how do we shape the global narrative around play, learning, and creativity? It's a very fuzzy, open-ended question. It's a very cultural question, one that you think could not maybe be answered by data, but the framing job is that to translate this question into a more tangible question that can lead to what you look for, therefore. So how we break that down is, for example, first we try to understand what are the drivers and barriers to play. So if you want to shape the global narrative around play, you need to pick up a narrative, make it bigger, a narrative of your choice, and make it bigger. So to understand that, you need to understand what are the narratives around play. But narratives could be like trends, they could be everything. We are not interested in narratives, we are interested in what's driving play, learning, creativity. What are the barriers to play, learning, creativity? Because if something's driving it, something's blocking it, then what you have what we call a tension. So once you understand the tension, all tensions around play, learning, and creativity, you understand the discourse today. What's the bigger narrative? What's smaller? And so on. The second question you need to answer is what narrative can the brand own? So if there's five narratives or tensions that we found, of these, maybe this one's bigger, but our brand is really far from it. They've not done work around this space much. They don't stand for that as a brand. It's not in their brand DNA. Then you choose something else which is big enough. So, what narrative can you legitimately own? What can you play with? What can you win with? Once you know that, then you can start advising them in terms of your strategy for, okay, how do we own that narrative? How do we become the influential voice within that narrative? How do we make that narrative bigger? And how do we dial up the concerns and importance? So we speak to the drivers, we speak to the barriers that we found earlier, and we can own that narrative. Hopefully, that gives you a sense of how you translate a very fuzzy culture question, which is what partners will ask you. It's not going to usually come from a culture lens. It's usually going to come from a business lens from your partner. So the left hand side language will be very business, very category centric. The right hand side should be, so therefore, what am I looking for? Another example is this big pharma company, and this is way back, by the way, in 2018, that came to us to ask that people are moving away from pills to like holistic remedies, wearables, and tech and innovation to get better sleep. So, what is the future of sleep in these markets? So, it was UK, US, Korea, and China, just to get a sense of very diverse markets around the world. They asked us that. So, what we got was the framing is that first you need to understand what the human needs around sleep, because any product innovation is rooted in what people need. Solutions need to be strongly linked to what people need, what they want, and therefore that will become a successful product. If you're building something that people don't need, obviously it will not be a huge success. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. But therefore, you need to understand what are the needs around sleep in the first place. Then you need to understand what is the solution landscape out there today. What are the products that are already available? What are people going to? What people need, what's available, the gap is where you innovate, right? The second thing that we do, and let's just run forward with that sleep example, is layer data sources. So, first things that you need to do is identify signals and proxies that answer your question. What do we mean by a signal and a proxy? A signal is anything that's directly telling you something about the question that you want to answer. A proxy is an indirect data source. We'll get into what they mean very quickly. So first things we did was we layered the benchmarks for better perspective. So UK, US, Korea, China, different enough, but interesting observations usually come from outliers. So sometimes you don't want to clip out the outliers, you want to bring in outliers to give you a rich contrast. So we suggested to our partner that we'll bring in Spain and Finland also into the study. Spain, why? Because it's culturally, it has been great at sleep, the siesta, for example. It's culturally, it's always celebrated sleep, but sleep habits have been worsening in the context of the demands of modern life. On the other hand, there's a market like Finland, where it's a culture that's really at a disadvantage because of the day-night cycle that you see there. Like you could have 12 months of darkness and 12 months of sunlight, which really messes up with your circadian rhythms. which means that it's hard to get sleep. But people in Finland and Scandinavian countries in general actually get better sleep than even people in India. Why? Because they've mastered sleep in a way that they've used devices, they use the kind of lights and alarms and houses and the ways to block out light and open up light and mimic sunlight at home. So they've done everything possible to create that circadian rhythm for themselves, or go they sleep much better. So it's a very different advanced market versus Spain. We want to add Spain and Finland into the mix to understand culturally what's happening uh, globally when we talk about sleep. So, what are the strategies that help you get to better sleep? What are the issues, for example, from Spain, which are pushing you away from a culture of great importance to sleep to a hectic modern lifestyle? The next thing we do is we need to understand what are the signals. Signals can be of two kinds. They can be performative signals and behavioral signals. Literally, I mean, surely you understand. A performed signal is like what you post on your Instagram feed, for example, what likes you have on social media on your stories uh, or reels. That's performative because that signal is visible to everyone. So if I'm posting a story on Instagram, I know that people will be able to see it, and I'll therefore frame it in a certain way so that it's acceptable for me to present to people. So I am being a bit conscious when I'm performing for my audience on social media. And indeed, if you're talking to people like in a qualitative research situation, you're talking to them, asking them a question, even then they'll be performative because just by the act of asking a question, you've asked for a performance and you're not getting to what they actually feel, but you are getting to an answer of what they are comfortable to share with you. So a good qualitative researcher will make the respondent a bit more comfortable so that they can share freely back with you. That's a perform signal. In our world, social posts, reviews, likes, everything that people can see is a performed signal. But everything that you are searching, the related videos that you see on YouTube, because millions of people have watched this video and then gone to watch the other video, those are related. Uh, Even sales data, which is maybe you're not buying something for it to be seen always. Let's say if it was a simple grocery product, sales data would be a behavioral signal. We call them behavioral signals because you are taking that action knowing that it's not for consumption or it's not going to be visible to others. Like, surely think of it like you don't want your search histories or your LLM chat histories visible to everyone. Everything that you are saying to ChatGPT in your personal account is private to you. That's a behavioral signal. That's something you're feeling, thinking about, and you want to get an answer around it. Those are behavioral. What's visible to people is perform. Always be sure of what you're looking at. Yeah, behavioral is what they do, performative is what they say. So that's the distinction. Now let's get to proxies. So we know signals, now let's think of proxies. So now in our framing, we need to understand what are the signals of sleep. So yeah, okay, what are the needs around sleep? We can look at search language, let's say. We can look at what people post when they think of sleep. By the way, these images hidden here, when you search for hashtag sleep, you could get this grid of cutesy images of pets or babies sleeping or birds sleeping, for example. That would be a perform signal. That's telling you something about how people visualize sleep, what's the idea of sleep in their minds. But when you're looking at search histories, what you get is this increasingly problematic relationship that we have with sleep and rest that's been worsening for the last 2 decades. In terms of the next part of our framing was to understand the solution landscape. So what commercially what's available out there. Now that data you may be able to get from the partner that you're working with, but if you can't get that data, you need to think of a great proxy. So I don't know the sales data when I look at Amazon, but I do know between product A and product B, if one has 1200 ratings and the other has 12,000 ratings, it's a no-brainer which one is making greater sales. So you may not know the sales number, but relatively, just by looking at Amazon ratings for a product, you can know which ones are having a greater commercial impact, right? Because only an X percent assumption is that 100 people buy a product, X percent of them leave a review on Amazon. And if that X percent is 1200 for one, 12,000 for the other, you know which one's making more sales. That is a proxy to understand commercial impact. The other one could be what are the new products that are coming into market and that are being really successful? You could look at crowdfunding.